Hi, everybody. I'm Kelly, a three-time surrogate with Growing Generations, as well as a member of the Growing Generations admissions team. I'm here to talk to you today about the process of becoming a surrogate. So feel free, if you join us live, you can go ahead and ask any questions. So just make a comment like you would if you were asking a question just on a regular post. So for those of you who haven't used Facebook Live before, this is one of our first Facebook Lives. So we have plenty planned in the future regarding egg donation, compensation, the referral program. So lots can be learned. This one, like I said, specifically is about becoming a surrogate and what that application process looks like. So one of the first things I'd like to mention is our website, which is amazing if you ask me. It is growinggenerations.com. There you'll see that you can click to look at the surrogacy process, egg donation, be a surrogate, or be an egg donor. So for what we're talking about today, you would click on be a surrogate. And when you click on that, it's going to take you to a whole bunch of information about being a surrogate. Sometimes people like to call and just ask, like, how do I become a surrogate? And to be honest with you, that's kind of a lengthy conversation. So one of your best bets is to go to our website. When you go there, you'll be able to see several different pages about, being a surrogate. The compensation is completely laid out there. We really like to be transparent about things, so we like to give you all the information before you apply. So you're able to see exactly what your compensation would be before you move forward in the process, which is awesome. If you do decide to move forward and you want to apply, you'll see you can do that a few different ways. One is you could click on the button that says become a surrogate, or on different pages, it'll say like apply today. So if you were to click on that, that's going to take you to a pre-qualification form, if you will. Kind of quick questions, just asking about, kind of very superficial questions. Have you given birth before, which is a requirement. It'll ask a few medical questions. It'll find out what state you live in, which again, some states, most states are good for surrogacy, but there are a few states that we're not able to work in. So the good news is you could fill out that pre-qualification form. And once you do that, immediately you will find out whether you could proceed to the application or whether there's something that maybe you didn't fit in the minimum qualifications. Some of those minimum qualifications, let's see, you need to be between 21 and 39 years old. Like I mentioned before, you need to have already given birth before and also be parenting at least one of your children. Obviously, if they're older and adults and you just had an earlier pregnancy, so you're still within that time frame, that's fine. Let's see, states, like I mentioned, obviously, let's see, more than 6 pregnancies, unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to move forward. More than 3 C-sections. Of course, we want to make sure that you're not in any form of government programs like food stamps or cash aid, but utilizing government insurance is fine. So what I was saying is, what's cool about that is when you get that application, let's say you don't qualify, it'll tell you exactly why. And some of those things could be changed. So for instance, let's say, you've kind of fallen on hard times lately and you're on food stamps. Okay, that's fine. And what we just need to do is, once you get off those and you've been off for several months, about 6 months or so, and we know that you're doing really well without them, then we could totally continue. Something like BMI, which is, using your height and your weight ratio. Pretty much, you need to be between 19 to below 34 BMI. So let's say, maybe you just had a baby, and so your BMI is a little bit higher than it normally is. And so it says that you can't move forward because of your BMI. Well, good news is, once you, lose a little bit of weight or whatever, or gain weight, let's say if you're under the requirement, then you can go ahead and reapply again. For a lot of people, again, once you do that pre-qualification form, you're going to move straight on to the application process. And what I love about the application now versus when I first joined is you can kind of continually do it. So let's say you start the application process because you always wanted to be a surrogate. And so you're filling out questions about your previous pregnancies, your medical history, some psychological and social information. And all of a sudden your child comes in and they need help going to the bathroom or something, and we've all been there, right? So the thing is you can leave that And then later, when you have time, perhaps it's nap time or bedtime or whatever, some mommy time, you can go back and continue with that application. And then once you're finished with that application, you're going to submit it. Now, this is where I absolutely love Growing Generations, because Growing Generations, once they receive that application, they will respond back to you within 1 business day. That means if you apply sometime on Wednesday, you're hearing from us Thursday, whether that's that you're not able to move forward, or let's say we just need some more, we have some questions about your application, or your application looks absolutely amazing and we want to move forward. We're still going to call you because we feel like, talking with our applicants is really important and reaching out to them is very important. And just because you may not have any questions at that point, once we call you, that's a really great time to ask some questions. So just a reminder, because I see we have several people who are joining us. So hello. If you have any questions, feel free to make that comment and I'll answer. I will go ahead and also kind of throw in some of our frequently asked questions as well as we proceed. So once you have talked to somebody about your application and it has, the decision's been made that you look like an excellent candidate and we're going to go ahead and move forward with that, your next step would be we would invite you to schedule a consult call. Now, the consult call is a 60 to 90-minute phone conversation where we just kind of go over everything that you need to know in order to have all the information that you need to make an educated decision about whether surrogacy is right for you. So it's kind of like a two-way phone interview where it gives us a chance to learn more about you. It gives you a chance to learn more about us, ask any questions, discuss any concerns, and then us, basically we're going to impart a whole bunch of information to you about what the next several months would look like if you chose to move forward with us for your surrogacy. Again, this is a longer conversation and we don't expect everyone to remember every single part of it. However, Growing Generations feels like it's very important that you have all this information before you're pregnant and before you move forward. So we're going to want to make sure that any and all questions and concerns that you have, that your partner has, maybe even your children might have a question. You could bring those to the consult call and we will gladly discuss all those things. All right. Once you decide to move forward, whether that's that same day as the consult call, or perhaps you have to go back and talk to your partner about it, then what you could do is, if you need to call, you just call us back or email us back and say like, hey, Danielle, it was really great talking to you the other day. Pete and I decided that we want to move forward. Awesome. So then at that point in time, you'd start your screening process. And the screening process pretty much is, there's a paperwork phase where we gather information like medical records from your previous births. We'll get insurance information to see if we can utilize your own insurance or if we need to purchase insurance for you. We're going to go do a background check on both you and your partner. I know I've mentioned partner a few times, just to kind of throw it out there though, you don't have to have a partner or a husband, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, or a wife in order to continue. We have plenty of women who are single who they're a part of the surrogate process and have a really great journey. They just usually pick a main support person that's going to help them through that process. So, pretty much it's open regardless of your relationship status. So there's that. And I'm looking to see if there's any questions. Let's see really quickly. Hi guys, I see everybody joining. Let's see here. Somebody asks, can you have had C-sections? Trisha, great question. So yes, you can have C-sections. However, you can't have any more than 3. And basically what happens there is we're following ASRM guidelines. And these are guidelines that are put forth that our doctors and even our psychologists and mental health professionals use to kind of determine like what's safe for a woman to proceed or not. And so one of those things is not having any more than 3 C-sections. So if you've already had 1 or 2, totally fine. If you've had 3 C-sections, then unfortunately, we're not going to be able to proceed. But that's a great question. The other thing when we're talking about C-sections, in case you're not aware, if you look on our compensation page, you'll be able to see that when it shows compensation. So like for instance, let's say I'm a California surrogate, first time, so my compensation, and I'm working, my compensation will be $53,500. If for some reason I ended up with a C-section, for medical reasons, obviously, like whether it's position of the baby, or maybe you've had a C-section in the past, so it just makes sense to have another C-section and you're okay with that, then what we do is you actually get compensated an additional $2,500 for that C-section, because we do know it's an invasive procedure. I've actually had a C-section myself, and I can attribute that, yes, it's a little bit different than having a vaginal C-section when it comes to, getting back to normal, and you're vacuuming a few weeks later than you would if you were giving birth vaginally. So, you'll get there, or driving. So we want to make sure that you're compensated for that. So there's that. Let's see if we have any other questions. Let's see here. My daughter says, "Hey, Mom, how do you explain to your kids what's going on with surrogacy?" Well, so thanks, Ruby, for that question. I will say that one of the things that I did with my children when I was coming through the surrogacy process, the first time they were younger, so I had, Ruby was probably in the first grade, Preston was probably his last year of preschool, and Sawyer was like a year old. So obviously, as you're trying to explain things to children, the 1-year-old's not going to get it so much, but you'd be surprised at what kids can grasp. There are lots of books out there that could be helpful in this situation. We actually have a blog section in our, on our website. It's called Resources, or actually you can even be on the website, scroll down, see the question mark, and write down, type in surrogacy books for kids, and you're going to see a whole bunch of books that we, have let you know of, like, these are really great books for kids explaining the surrogacy process, because it is different from maybe what they've known before. What's cool about it, like my favorite was a kangaroo pouch, which is where a mommy kangaroo helps a baby kangaroo, helps a kangaroo family have their joey. And so that surrogate kangaroo actually takes that joey, holds it in her pouch for 9 months, and then gives that joey back to its parents. And so it's great because it kind of shows kids that it's not our baby, and it's not my baby, and we're not keeping this baby. We're actually receiving this kangaroo, or embryo, if you will. We're going to hold it. I like to call it a case of extreme babysitting for 9 months, and then we're going to go ahead and give that family back their baby. The other thing that I like to do with my kids is I would get a picture of my intended parents, and I would put that in a frame and actually add it to our house. We had a table where we had lots of pictures of family. And so whenever we would talk about the baby, we'd be like, "Whose baby is this?" And my kids would be like, "It's George and Sanja's baby." So of course they knew from the get-go, kind of all over the time, like, "Ooh, what do you think George and Sanj, like, what are they going to name their babies?" Or, "What do you think Miles and Steven?" Or, "What do you think, Ben and so-and-so?" Like, whoever your parents are, you can constantly remind your kids that, hey, this isn't ours. Like, we're helping somebody. And by seeing them, a lot of times your kids might meet your intended parents in person too. But by seeing about it, by talking about it, it really helps acknowledge that, once this baby's born, it's going back with its family. It's not staying with our family because we already have our family. Okay, so great question. Let me see if there's any other questions. No other questions yet, so that's great. Let's see. So after your consult call, like I said, once you move forward, you would start that screening process with Growing Generations. That starts with, like I said, the background check, gathering that medical information, your pregnancy records, so that way we could send that to our doctors to make sure that you are a good candidate. Sometimes once we get the medical records, there may be some things that maybe you forgot that happened during your pregnancy, or maybe you were unaware. And so if that comes up, we just kind of ask you a little bit more information about that. Some things are totally fine. Other things may be, like, if you didn't realize that, the reason why you gave birth early was because, you had elevated blood pressure and that led to an emergency C-section. Well, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to proceed at that point. But this is why we're gathering all this information, because the last thing that we want you to do is do something that's going to be bad for your health. And not just bad for your health, but also psychologically. And that's why one of the things that we'll do is we'll have you come, either you if you're single, or you and your partner will come to Los Angeles to have a medical screening and a psychological screening done, and that's in person. So it's probably one of maybe 2 times you'd actually have to come to Los Angeles. Everything else is done locally where you live. So you would come, you would have your medical and your psychological screening done. Usually around the same time, you're also maybe matching with intended parents already. Sometimes that's another question that sometimes people ask is, well, how long until I get my intended parents? You applied yesterday and you're like, when do I get to help a family? And it's all very exciting. So one of the things that we do is, we like to get some of the initial screening done before we start sharing profiles. Then as you work forward through the process, you will have some pre-screening labs done. At that point, you may go straight to the in-person screening. You may start receiving a profile. We do it one at a time. So that way you can look at each couple, decide whether you think that you'd like to work with them or not. If it's a no, it's a no, and we find you someone else. If it's a yes, that's awesome, and then we'll send them your profile. And then once they like your profile, then that's when we have a match meeting. And some people will have their match meetings before they have their full in-person screening done. Some people may not have their match meeting until after they're actually, had their screening done. And some people, not only have they had their screening done, but it usually takes about 2 weeks to get that clearance. So some women, when they go to match with their intended parents, they've actually completed all of screening and they're completely done with that process. So it's kind of case by case. A lot of times, for women, matching is one of the most fun parts of it, to see the parents and to see, who you're going to help. I'm looking to see if there's any other questions. Ooh, this is a great one. Thank you, Lacey. This one says, what were your favorite moments about being a surrogate? I would say matching, obviously. I always make a joke that I loved all the profiles that Gigi gave me. You do one at a time, and I always chose the first one. And I make a joke and say that, my surrogate, my uterus must be easy. But I think what it is when you want to help someone, it's really hard to look at a couple and not see that desire to be a parent. And as a mom yourself, you know what that is. You know what that's like to have your own child, and so that kind of feeds into it. And so whenever they give me a profile, of course, I love them. And part of that is it's not luck. It's actually the matching process that we do at Growing Generations, where we really look at who you want to work with, like who you feel comfortable working with, who your partner feels comfortable working with. And at the same time, making sure that you are a good match for those intended parents who may need a surrogate who lives in a certain state, or who has her own insurance, or who is using, who maybe some intended parents might like a stay-at-home mom. Other intended parents might like somebody who, that works. It just kind of depends. So it's this matching game of like finding out the surrogate and this intended parents, and then making sure that's going to be a good fit. And Gigi is awesome about that. And so my favorite was always like seeing the profile, and then you get really excited, and then you get to meet them. I would say my absolute favorite part of being a surrogate was once I delivered and seeing my intended parents with their children for the first time was like amazing. And not that my own pregnancies and birth weren't amazing, because it is amazing to, have your own children too. But there's just something life-changing about seeing a couple who maybe thought for a while that they would never have a biological child of their own or a child of their own, and seeing them become parents. And one of my favorites was when my first journey, I gave birth to identical twin girls. And besides the parents being excited, when we were leaving the hospital, the grandma was holding me, Apache was holding me and saying, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And one of the intended parents' cousins was there, and she was thanking me for, helping them become dads. And you just can't get, you don't forget that. And I think it's one of the reasons why a lot of times people decide to do a surrogacy more than once, like I did, because, I went into it thinking I'd only do it one time. And after that moment, I was like, oh yeah, this there's something special here. And so I was hooked and I wanted to help more families. So let's see, any other questions? Let's see. How did you decide you wanted to work with growing generations? Great question, Danielle. So this one, for me, I went to Google, and this was back in, 2005 is when I first Googled about being a surrogate. And so for me, I wanted to help a gay couple specifically. So I Googled surrogacy for gay dads. And Growing Generations was one of the first ones that came up, and a few other agencies came up as well. I would say for me, it was more of the website and how informative it was. I felt like some of the other agencies that I was looking at, they weren't really upfront about things. They wouldn't share certain information with me until I actually applied, which I was not a fan of. Like, I want to know ahead of time, like, what am I getting into? What do I need to be thinking about before I spend time filling out an application? So that was important to me. I also love that, eventually at that time, I actually decided to complete my own family before moving on. And what I loved was that Growing Generations would continue to contact me every so often and ask me like, hey, how's your pregnancy going? And, how's breastfeeding going? And, just let us know when you'd like to return. And one time when they had, emailed me back and said, my notes say that, you thought that you'd be done by breastfeeding by now. And I was like, yeah, let's do this. So I love that follow through. I love not being, falling through the cracks. I love feeling like I was special. And that's only continued to grow, because that's one of the other things that I love about like working with Growing Generations as a staff member or a team member, is that they're always open to change, where, Growing Generations has been around for over 20 years. They know what they're doing. There's been over 1,650 babies that have been born. Actually, I think we're at like 1,670 now, but we had a few more babies born this week, so I'm not quite sure on the number. But lots of babies have been born, and for me, it's like they know what they're doing. They, had been around for a while. And I also, like I said, with working with them, one of the things I love is that they're open to doing things differently if need be. One of the biggest examples of that for me was the compensation package for surrogates, where about, I guess it was like a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, we, said, we think that there should be more compensation. And we think that instead of saying that you have to use housekeeping, or you have to use this, or you have to do that, these are grown women who can make responsible decisions for themselves. And so how about we just do a flat rate compensation? And so that way they can choose whether they want to use that money for housekeeping or for maternity clothes, and how much to do that for. Some of you have older children and don't need housekeeping because they're called kids and they do chores. So whatever. But the good news is you still get that compensation. And so maybe maybe that's what you use to pay your kids. Or maybe, instead of that, you choose to use a chiropractor because you'd like to do that during your pregnancy. And that new compensation package lets you do that, which I think is great. Let's see, I'm gonna look for other questions. What was your best memory after giving birth? Again, thank you, Anna. Like I said, I think I loved just seeing the parents of the baby for the first time and that extended family. I also loved, like, where I gave birth, some of the nurses had also been surrogates before. So I remember when they were rolling me out of my C-section, because I had a C-section with my first surrogacy journey. So when they rolled me out, both of the women that were with me, who were the nurses, one was currently pregnant as a surrogate, and the other one had been a surrogate years ago. And I absolutely loved that. And I think it's kind of interesting that when I look at some of the women that are surrogates for us now that I'm kind of, behind the scenes and I get to see this and I deal with these women all the time, they're nurses, they're teachers, they have their own businesses. Some of them are students. Some of them are stay-at-home moms. So it really is interesting, all the different, women who choose to kind of go this way. But the one thing that they all have in common, obviously, is they're all moms, and they all know the amazingness that is having a child and having a family. And altruistically, they see that, gosh, like I can help someone, especially if they had an easy pregnancy, which most surrogates have really great pregnancies. It's one of the reasons why they can continue. And so, they think, oh gosh, this is like a way that I could give back, and in a huge way. So let's see here. Courtney said, can you still apply to be a surrogate if you had your tubes tied? I feel like that's a dumb question, but wasn't sure if it makes sense. No, you're right. That's not a dumb question, but you can still be a surrogate. When you have your tubes tied, your fallopian tubes, whether they're actually cut and cauterized or like little clips on them or whatever, what we need basically is the uterus and your uterine lining. And since we're not using your own eggs, it doesn't matter whether we can, get to them that way or not. And what's going to happen is that embryo is going to be placed inside your uterus. So you can totally be a surrogate even if you've had your tubes tied. Just since, and this may be another question down here. So I'll just answer it right now, which is an IUD. Some women have an IUD. Great form of birth control. Yes, you can become a surrogate. However, we're going to have you remove that before you have your in-person screening. But just again, because we're on your side here, we want to make sure that you're not going to lose your birth control method and then you can't move forward. So one of the things that's going to happen is your admissions team is going to work with you to let you know when you should get that removed. So that way we can make sure that you guys, pass the background check, that the doctor gives you the okay, that we know that we can get you insurance, all these things. We're going to kind of make sure all that's okay, and then we'll have you remove that, because the last thing we want you to do is remove it and then for some reason you can't move forward, and then now you're out your IUD. So, we'll work with you to get that. Some things that might stop your journey for a little bit would be if you're on Norplant or Implanon, like any type of implant for birth control methods, or Depo-Provera. So with that, we would need you to stop taking those things or have the implant removed. And then we need to wait for 2 regular periods, which for some people can happen right away with Norplant. But with Depo-Provera, sometimes it could be a year or 2 before you actually get a regular cycle back. So that would hold you up. It doesn't mean you can't ever be a surrogate. It just means that we need to wait until, your periods have returned and are regular in order to move forward. Okay, let's see here. Somebody said, what is the cutoff age to be a surrogate? Great question, Billy. Basically, we cut off at about 39 with our application. However, I think it's like 39 exactly. Sometimes our returning surrogates, so we have surrogates who had started at a younger age, and maybe they're continuing on with their intended parents, or if somebody is absolutely stellar, we can kind of look and see case by case. But for the most part, we're sticking between the 21 and 39. Like I said, if you have previous experience as a surrogate, and of course, if you're using your same intended parents for like a sibling journey, there's a little bit more leeway there. But that's where we're kind of going. And again, that's based off of not just ASRM guidelines, but also a lot of the doctors that we work with wanting to, say okay that this is in fact okay for that person. And it also is a matching issue where, if you are an experienced surrogate and you're 39 and everything looks great, hey, that might be matchable. But if you're, 39, 40, 41, and by the way, I'm saying this as someone who's almost 44, so I'm not some 20-year-old telling you that you're too old to be a surrogate. So that's just the way that it goes. Like, unfortunately, with some of the age, some of our, just kind of like how with egg donation, people kind of age out at like 30 or 31. We have a lot of egg donors who then become surrogates because they still want to help people have families, and now this is a different way that they could do that. So great question. Hey, Michelle, I see some former surrogates on here too. That's awesome. Let's see, some other questions that come about. Oh, sometimes people ask, like, do we have to use your own egg? Again, no, this is gestational surrogacy, not traditional surrogacy. Sometimes people, they'll ask kind of funny questions where one time I had somebody ask, because I had twins, does that mean that I get to keep one of them? No, I'm not in the business of kidnapping. So both of my intended parents' babies would be given back to them. Some other questions that I've seen is, how long does the process take? Sometimes people think, oh, well, it's 9 months. Pregnancy is 9 months. Well, yes, pregnancy is usually around 9 months. However, there are some things you have to do in order to get to that point. So I'm not going to have like a 60 to 90-minute consult call with you right now, but I can summarize and tell you that, if you were to come in right now, which we're the beginning of August right now, so if you were to come in right now, perhaps you'd probably be through the first part of the screening process by like mid-September. Maybe you'd be heading to your in-person screening at the end of September, usually probably in October. You would be matching probably in September and October. Then once you have your match, you'd be going through legal to get all your contracts written out, so that way you're protecting yourself and your intended parents. Then you'd be looking at your schedule to see like, hey, when can I get pregnant? When can I go back down to Los Angeles and have my embryo transfer? And that's typically your second trip down to Los Angeles. Most embryo transfers happen in Los Angeles. However, some intended parents actually have their own reproductive endocrinologists or IVF doctors that they work with. So, it may be that you have your embryo transfer someplace else. However, again, because we like to disclose this information ahead of time, you would know that before you even matched with them. Like that would be a part of their profile. So you would know like, oh, I'm not transferring in Los Angeles. I'm transferring in Las Vegas or Connecticut or San Francisco. And then there's that. So I typically say like people who are coming through right now, I'd probably say we'd be looking at like a December or January transfer. It also depends obviously on your availability, on how quickly you come through the surrogacy, the screening process. If they're using a fresh or a frozen egg donor, like just kind of all those different things. I will point out, because I was just thinking, when you do fill out your application, so compensation wise. So when you fill out your application and you're moving forward, once you have your consult call and you move forward, if you're able to get all of your paperwork in that we need, so things like I mentioned before, medical records, like the pregnancy and birth records, your insurance information, applying for new life agency, which is the type of insurance that we use, 6 weeks of your pay stubs or your partner's pay stubs, trying to look through all my, your driver's license and your social security information. So that way we can run that background check. And you will end up at the end of that having a video conference with your admissions specialist. And if you're able to do all of that and do that video conference with your admissions specialist within 30 working days, so not counting weekends, but 30 working days, you would actually receive $500 of your compensation at that point. You'd also receive $500 of your compensation once you are medically and psychologically cleared. So, and then moving farther on, you would receive another payment when you signed your contracts with your intended parents and when you started your medication. And those depend on whether you're getting lost wages or not. So if you're not working, that would be $1,000. If you are working and you earn, more than $6,000 a year, that'd be $1,500. So really, you'll be bringing in at least $3,000 to $4,000 of your compensation before you're even pregnant. And we do that because, you're doing things. You're filling out the paperwork that we need you to do. You're actively participating in this, and you should be compensated for that, even though you're not pregnant yet. Okay, so I see that there's a few other questions there. Someone says, do surrogates ever want to keep the baby? Good question. I have never, a few things. One is Growing Generations has never had, any of the surrogates ever want to keep the baby. We've also not had intended parents who have gone away. That was my question when I first came in on my consult call was, how do I not get another kid? So, one of the things is, you're signing contracts stating that, you're not the parent as a surrogate, that the intended parents are the parents. And the intended parents are actually giving the contact information for somebody who would take over if something were to happen. So let's say something sadly, you hate to even think about it, but if something were to happen to the intended parents and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I'm 8 months pregnant with this baby and they, passed away in a car accident or something. in their contract is who is responsible for those babies, kind of like how they would do that with having a living will and testament, where they would say if something were to happen to them, where are those babies going? And those, basically, bottom line, those babies aren't going with you. And at the same time, one of the reasons why we've never had a woman want to keep that baby is because we have a really great psychological screening process. So we screen out potential issues that might come about like that, including other things, which is another reason why it's great to use an agency to do a surrogacy, because we're making sure that all these safety standards are being met for both the intended parents and the egg donors and the surrogates, so everyone can feel really comfortable and confident in that situation. Billy Joe asks, when the parents want siblings, do they generally want the same surrogate? And she also has a follow-up question, was it planned twins for you or it just happened? So first thing, typically, a lot of times surrogates and intended parents would love to work with each other again. And if that's the case, awesome. Okay. Other times it may be like maybe unfortunately the surrogate has aged out, or something happened in that pregnancy to now where she can't move forward. Like maybe she gave birth, had a premature delivery, or something else happened, in that. So a lot of times when we see sibling projects, we do see, usually typically first we'll ask, like, do you want to use the same surrogate, to the intended parents? Same things when we have surrogates who come back and say, oh, I want to do it again. One of the things that we'll ask them is, hey, have you talked to your intended parents about, like your previous ones, about the fact that you want to do this again? Because obviously we would love to set them both up back together again, but sometimes the intended parents aren't ready for another child and the surrogate is ready to move forward. So it just kind of depends, but you can see that, I've seen that go both ways. With the twins, was it planned twins or did it just happen? So I actually, in my journeys, I delivered 3 times. My first was a set of identical twins, and identical obviously wasn't planned, but we did put in 2 embryos, and one did not take and the other one split. And so we still ended up with, 2 identical girls. My second time, we had 2 embryos that were placed in. And of course, the intended parents were hoping for twins, and I was fine with that. So both of them took, and so we got twins again. And then my last journey, my intended parents actually only wanted 1. They did want a sibling later on, but because of like health issues and things like that, they just, it is a higher risk pregnancy. And so they wanted to make sure that, that everything was okay. And so for them, that was, hey, we're just going to transfer 1. And then luckily for them, that 1 did not split into 2, which they would have been fine with, and I would have been fine with, because that's kind of signing on. You kind of say like, hey, if that happens, I am okay with that. So, for mine, yes, they were all planned. And I was fine anyway, really, when it came to that. Just, I feel I have really great pregnancies. Even after the first set of twins, for me, it wasn't that much of a difference from carrying a singleton. So I was fine saying that I'd be fine to do it again. And then it just so happens that I did. I will say nowadays, statistically, when I look at some of the ultrasounds that come through, like on the back end, there are definitely a lot more singletons nowadays than twins than back when I did my surrogacies. And I delivered in 2008, 2010, and 2012. So anyway, so there's that. I will also say that, like, for instance, for myself, I was going to do another journey, a sibling journey for my intended parents, but then we had a family emergency happen. And so even though I had been screened for that and my partner had screened with me, we actually had to take a step back and because of course my family comes first. So, but they were able to be matched up with an amazing surrogate who helped them complete their family, which is awesome. Because again, ultimately, that's what the goal is helping to create families, and safely. Let's see. Courtney says, is it more likely to end up with a multiplexer, just 1 baby? And multiples. Got it. Hey, either way, new terminology. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's more likely. And really, when you come through in the application process, like at that point in time, we don't know who you're going to be matched with. We don't know how healthy their embryos are. We don't know if they're going for 1 or 2. And we also don't know if, let's say you match with somebody who only wants 1 and they're going to do a transfer with just 1 embryo. We also don't know that, like, what happens if that doesn't take? We can't say that those intended parents won't then say, oh my gosh, like we've had 1 or 2 failed transfers with just 1, let's go ahead and put a 2 in, again, to kind of, hopefully increase the chances. So that's one of the reasons why we kind of make sure that all of our surrogates that come through the program are open to the possibility of carrying twins, or the possibility of a 2 embryo transfer versus a 1 embryo transfer, because we can't say what's going to happen. We can't see it in the future. But what we can do is prepare and have those conversations ahead of time, so that way everybody can start thinking about what that might look like and if they're okay with it or not. Because again, we don't ever want someone to do something that they don't feel comfortable with. Let's see here. Let's see. Yeah, somebody else, it looks like they're maybe answering that question. Depends on how many embryos you transfer and if they all both stick or if one splits. Amanda's right. Let's see a lot of other people joining. Again, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to write out the comment. I'm going to look really quick just to see if there's anything else that I wanted to make sure that I hit as well. Sometimes a lot of people will have, their partner will have that question. So they'll say, hey, my husband or my wife or my girlfriend or my boyfriend wants to know, like, why do I have to come and do the screening, or why does he or she have to be a part of it? Well, you're a couple, and you're going to do this together. And especially if you're sexually active, we're going to need to make sure that they're being tested for STDs. And we also test for illegal drugs. Like I said, we do the background check as well. All right, so of course it's 12:40 right now, which is going a little longer than probably some of us anticipated. But like I said, this could be a discussion for hours. But we will be doing more Facebook Lives in the future. Let me see, I just want to make sure if there's anybody else who asked a question, because I don't want to leave any questions unturned. The other thing is, if you join this late, this will be posted on our website, and so you can watch it again for the part that you missed. Or if you have anybody who you think would be an amazing surrogate, feel free to share this with them. And one of the things that I'll kind of leave you off with is our referral program. And Growing Generations has a referral program where if you refer someone to be a surrogate, so if they fill out the application and they put that they were referred and they put your name on there, if they get to the point of having the consult call, we will actually pay you $100 for the referral. If they make it all the way to signing contracts with their intended parents, then you'll receive $900. So you could actually earn up to $1,000 for every single referral. Not only that, you can enter into we do a quarterly gift card extravaganza, which actually I just notified the Q2 people yesterday. One of them chose a $250 Amazon gift card, and the other chose a $250 gift card to the local movie theater. So lots of chances to win. And if you say, oh, I'm too old, I can't do this, or oh, I gave birth at 33 weeks, and so I can't do this. There's still a way that you can be involved, and there's still a way that you could help create families and help people who can't have kids on their own. And that's by referring people to Growing Generations that you think would make an excellent egg donor or an excellent surrogate. And with the egg donor, the way that works is, if you were to refer somebody to egg donation, once they have their contract signed with their intended parents, you would receive $250 as a referral fee. So if you have any other questions, you can always reach to me at Kelly at growinggenerations.com. That's Kelly with a Y, at growinggenerations.com. And I will leave off, sorry, I had 2 other questions. One was, I know you talked about coming to LA for implant. Do you have a location in Las Vegas? That kind of depends on who your intended parents are using. I have seen some embryo transfers happen in Las Vegas, but again, that's contingent on the doctor that your intended parents will be using. And then I see one last question, which is Billy. Joe asked, what's the best advice you could give future surrogates? This is an amazing question, and this is great. there's any advice that I can give you is that surrogacy is a marathon and not a sprint, that you need to be flexible, that you need to acknowledge that there are times, where you maybe some things that you want to do, like if I'm, 37 weeks pregnant and my sister wants me to fly up to see her in Oregon, that's not happening because I don't want to give birth in Oregon. There's lots of things that can kind of come up, and that's one of the things that we talk about during the consult call is letting all that information. So I would say, do your research, realize that this is a process and it's not easy. It's not the easiest thing you'll ever do, but I guarantee you it's probably one of the most life-changing things you'll ever do. I always say, if it's something that you think that you could do, or it's something like helping families is in your heart, why not look more into it? Because not only would you, be teaching your children probably an amazing lesson on what makes a family and who can become parents, and this kind of act of selfless giving, like, yes, you're being compensated, but still, you could make more working full-time someplace else. So the fact is that if this is on your heart, my best advice would be to go for it. All right, so I will go ahead and end today's Facebook Live. We will be back again with different topics. Also, like I said, we'll do one on the referral program. We have a lot of things planned in the future, so I appreciate you taking the time. If you want to make sure that you are seeing our Facebook Lives when they come on live, then you need to follow Growing Generations on Facebook. You can also, you might even see it on your screen right now towards the end. There may be a little gray box that says follow, specifically live. Go ahead and click on that so that way it'll always let you know. And then keep in mind that just because you maybe missed the live presentation, you could still watch that and even fast forward if need be to get to where you need to be. So again, feel free to follow us on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We have an amazing Instagram account to where, in a time where there's a lot of negative things that you read on Facebook, I can't think of anything more positive to be reminded of daily than people having babies and the amazing process of pregnancy and birth and family. So feel free to follow, and we will talk again later. Have a great day and a wonderful weekend. Bye.